Today we're making pumpkin bread. This pumpkin bread is a quick bread, meaning that we're going to make the batter with the leavening agent. And for that we're going to use baking soda and baking powder. That way we don't have to wait for the dough to rise and we can bake the batter right away. For this recipe you'll need
3½ cups of flour, 3 cups of sugar, 1½ teaspoons of salt, 2 teaspoons of baking soda, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of ground nutmeg, 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, 2/3 cup of water, 1 cup of oil, 4 eggs, about 16 ounces of pumpkin, and 1 cup of semi-sweet mini chocolate chips.
To get things started, you'll want to preheat your oven to 350 degrees. While your oven's preheating, you can spray your pans with nonstick cooking spray. The recipe is for 3 whole loaves. You can either use 3 loaf pans, or I like to split mine up and use 1 loaf pan, 1 9x9 pan, and then about 1.5 trays of mini muffins.
Measure out about 1 cup of semi-sweet mini chocolate chips. I personally like to add in a little more than a cup, but it's up to you. After that, set it aside until later.
Now, it doesn't really matter what order you put these ingredients in and mix them together. I just did the dry ingredients all at once and then the wet ingredients, but for this recipe, it's so simple it doesn't really matter.
In a large bowl, combine your 3 cups of sugar, 3½ cups of flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and 2 teaspoons of baking soda. Add in 1 1/4 teaspoons of salt, 1 teaspoon of ground nutmeg, and 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon. Then give your dry ingredients a little stir and move on to your wet ingredients. Add in your 16 ounces of pumpkin. I used 1 15-ounce can and found that it worked just as well. Add your 2/3 cup of water, 1 cup of vegetable oil, and 4 eggs. Then mix all your ingredients until they are well blended. Add in your mini chips and mix until they are all incorporated. Then pour your batter into your greased pans. You'll want to pour only about 1/3 of the way up to halfway up so that the bread has room to rise. If you're using anything other than a loaf pan, you'll want to be aware of the baking times and adjust accordingly. For loaf pans, I usually bake for an hour. The 9x9 pan I baked for about 45 minutes, and the mini muffin pan I only popped in the oven for about 15 minutes. Here's how my pumpkin bread turned out. For storage, you'll want to keep your pumpkin bread in the fridge. If you're not going to be consuming it in the near future, I suggest putting it in the freezer and defrosting when you're ready to eat it.
And that is how you make my favorite pumpkin bread. To me, pumpkin bread is a year-round treat, and as you can tell, this recipe makes quite a lot. In that case, you can stick your other 2 loaves in the freezer and defrost it whenever you're feeling like more pumpkin bread, or you run out of the first loaf. I hope you enjoyed. Happy making!